The White Ribbon is a film that came out in 2009 that's written and directed by Michael Haneke. So, The White Ribbon is a $50 Patreon request from Perry Perez, the absolute legend. And obviously, I was incredibly psyched about this request because I love Michael Haneke as a filmmaker. I've seen almost all of his films. Caché is my personal favorite Michael Haneke film, but he's made so many other breathtaking films. The Piano Teacher, Funny Games, Code Unknown is even a great film. The Seventh Continent, also a fantastic film. So, yeah, Michael Haneke is a filmmaker that I really love. Probably at least in my top 15 favorite filmmakers. And after watching The White Ribbon, Michael Haneke does what he does best. He brings to the table that minimalist style that we all love from him. And he utilizes that style to create such an authentic and believable piece of filmmaking. And he utilizes that authenticity and his subtlety to create a really powerful and haunting film. But I have to admit that I actually watched this film twice because the first time I watched this film, I really enjoyed it. I appreciated it, obviously, but I felt like it was incredibly difficult for me to feel invested into the story and the characters. And I think that's mostly because of the fact that this film follows so many different characters, a lot more characters than I expected going into it. Because this film is set in a small village in 1910s Germany, and Michael Haneke basically focuses on 5 or 6 different families in this film, including all of their children. And I think it does divide the time between all these characters pretty well, but there is a lot of characters, and a lot of these families have a good number of children, and there was so many times throughout this film, especially on first viewing, where I felt like I couldn't feel the impact and the significance of a lot of scenes because I just had difficulty piecing together who's related to who, which child am I looking at, which family is this child from. But upon rewatch, obviously it was a lot easier to kind of follow the story and, understand the relationship between all these characters, and overall just made it a lot easier to follow. Therefore, I was able, the second time around, to understand the significance of certain scenes and to feel that emotional impact. So personally, I would recommend watching this film twice because I felt like this is a film that will only improve with more viewings. But yeah, obviously, I thought this movie was great. And as I mentioned, Michael Haneke's aesthetic directing style, I feel like has a lot to do with why his films are so great. Not only are they brilliantly written, because the screenplay of this film I think is really, really great, and the acting is also out of this world fantastic. But it's that minimalist style that he brings to the table that just makes everything in the film feel much more genuine and much more earned. And in contribution to that minimalist style, Michael Haneke once again chooses to only use diegetic sound and score for this film. So all the music that you hear in this film is coming from the film's actual setting. For instance, there's a scene in this film where the school teacher, who is also the narrator of the film, plays the organ for a woman that he wants to marry. And I had such a complex emotional reaction to that scene because in a way it is a type of romantic scene between the two characters, but at the same time, in just the way that the organ sounds, kind of makes it feel haunting, especially considering the events that come after it. And another aspect in regards to Haneke's minimalist style in this film is that this is one of his films where he decides to not show any on-screen violence. We do see some of the violent aftermaths of some of the events that occur in the film, but you don't see any actual on-screen violence. And Haneke doesn't always do that. Depending on what he's going for in a film, sometimes he will show you straight up disturbing violence on screen, but it's usually built up for a long period of time, and it's maybe only 1 or 2 scenes of some serious violence. But in this film, Haneke's choice to not show any on-screen violence, I think, was a great choice. Because, again, with this type of approach, he's here to show you that you don't really need to see the violence in order to feel the emotional impact of it. And that's clearly the case with this film. He shows you how powerful the use of sound and also how powerful the implication of something already is, that a lot of the times there's pretty much no reason to actually see it if you really want to feel the impact of it. But we do get some scenes of some intense verbal abuse. One scene in particular that contains the doctor character and the midwife, and that scene was so difficult to watch and get through. I don't think I've ever seen a character in a film get that degraded by words. That was intense shit. But it is a fantastic scene. It's wonderfully acted, and also in that scene we get some more shocking and uncomfortable revelations about the Doctor character. And obviously this is a very well written screenplay. I love the way that this film goes about expressing its themes, and also the way it chooses to unravel its mystery. Because I feel like this film delivers the perfect amount of ambiguity and clarity. Because in regards to the kind of murder mystery of what's going on in this town, I feel like the film gives a pretty clear implication on what's going on, but at the same time, it feels like there are some loose ends, and there are certain aspects of this mystery and of the story that still leaves you scratching your head, and it's a brilliant setup for an awesome discussion after the film's over. And yes, I also love the way that this film explores its themes, and I apologize when talking about the themes of this film that it kind of gets into spoilery territory. Like, I'm not going to come out and tell you, specific plot details or anything, but it's almost impossible to give any insight on the themes of this film without, edging spoiler territory. But this film tackles a lot of different things. First of all, this is a kind of generational and children's story that is kind of in a way a warning sign to how parents raise their children and the ideologies that we so strictly teach them. It's a film that kind of shows you the potential failures of specific religious teachings and also how you practice these things. To me, at least in part, is a film that's trying to express how a restrictive and confined upbringing can lead your children down a path that is the complete opposite of what you intended. In a way, it's expressing the notion that the more freedom you take away from a human being, the stronger the urge they're going to have to rebel against the norm. And if it means some kids got to be tortured, that's just the consequence of it. I also loved another theme of this film that I feel like was expressing how the more reliant we are on a more powerful figure for our well-being, it results in us having less power to hold that powerful figure accountable for their actions. Because if we upset that powerful entity in any way, they could take away our entire livelihood. And the time frame that this film is set in is basically a year before the First World War, and this film takes place throughout that entire year. So the film basically ends on an event that sparks the First World War. And, in regards to this film's historical significance in terms of what Michael Haneke was trying to express historically with this story, I'm not going to pretend like, I'm a historian and can tell you what he was trying to say there. But either way, I found it really interesting to see how Haneke was able to capture the societal and ideological consequences of this era and the kind of impact that has on children and really human beings in general. And even though, as I mentioned on rewatch, I enjoyed this film a lot more, I still think that having so many different characters in this film and dividing time between them in the way that he did makes it to where you get more of a detached experience from the film. Because even though, again, I did feel a lot more invested into the story and characters the second time around, I do feel like that if this was a bit more condensed, I would have felt the emotion a lot more than I did. But this was still an incredibly effective piece of filmmaking. I think it deserved the Palme d'Or that it won. And the craft of this film is so impressive. I mean, obviously, it's Michael Haneke. So I'm going to give The White Ribbon a solid 8 out of 10. I obviously highly recommend this film. This is a film that I would love to see on the Criterion Collection. Honestly, I don't really know why it's not on the Criterion Collection yet. Honestly, they should just come out with a Michael Haneke box set at this point. But either way, that's all I gotta say about The White Ribbon. If you really enjoyed what I had to say about the film, just give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.